week's edition of Brown and Crouppen Live, Facebook Live. I'm really excited about this week. We have a great topic. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, please remember to subscribe to our page so that you can watch these videos every week. We've got a great response to these so far. This week, the topic has to do with Uber and Lyft. And the idea is, you know, we know what happens, or generally we know what happens if we're in a car accident in our own car, or if we're hit by just a private citizen in their car. But what happens if you're in an Uber or in a Lyft and you're in a car accident? That's the topic today. What happens when it's Uber's fault? What happens when it's another car's fault? Who pays? What can I collect? And what do I need to know? So with us this week, we have Andrea Stanley. It's the first time you've joined us for one of these. And of course, our very own Andy Crouppen. Why don't we throw it to Andrea first and just sort of give us an idea of what happens. I'm a passenger. I'm in another city. I'm taking an Uber. And I'm just, you know, doing my own business. And all of a sudden, boom, collision occurs. And now I'm injured. What do I do?
It depends. I mean, if you're hit by someone else and it's their fault,
Okay.
then you would proceed and make a claim against the at-fault driver's insurance policy. So essentially, you know, make sure to stay calm. You know, accidents are very scary, but stay calm, and you want to get the person's information, take some pictures if you can, and get that person's insurance company's information and call them and let them know that an accident's happened.
Make sure no one's hurt.
So basically very similar to what would happen even if you were in your own car.
Although what might be interesting is, since it is an Uber, you know, you get a lot of younger people who maybe are scared driving, and the one thing you probably do want to do is you probably want to insist upon a police report being made, because sometimes with cab drivers and Ubers, you know, they're in a hurry, they're on the clock. If they're not driving, they're not making any money, and they may have an instinct to just say, let's get the information, pass it along, and I got to get this show on the road. The nice thing is historically, notoriously, taxi cabs were woefully underinsured. Oftentimes having either no insurance, really. There was a case not that long ago of a cab company in St. Louis that really had no insurance, and it was a famous case. The guy was hurt very badly, and ultimately I don't think recovered anything for his injuries. But even if they are insured, oftentimes the way they have it is it's like $10,000 per cab, something like that. So the good news is Uber and Lyft have, I believe, $1 million in liability coverage, and unusually also $1 million in underinsured
Well, let's break that down.
Yes.
Let's break that down. So you started with a situation where the other guy was at fault. Let's switch over and talk about, now I'm in that same Uber, I'm in a collision, but it wasn't the other driver at fault at all. In fact, let's make believe there's not even another driver. The Uber, the guy is looking at his GPS, not paying attention, slams right into a pole. So now what do I do? The Uber driver's at fault, and you say that there's liability coverage, but explain what that means and what I can get.
Well, so what that means is your case is against the Uber driver, him or herself, who is the at-fault party. So it's really not unlike any car accident where the person's insurance who's applicable is the person who is at fault for the accident.
But you'd be making your claim against Uber's insurance in that instance, right?
Correct, but to clarify, you're making the claim against the driver as an individual, but the reality is that Uber or Lyft's insurance carrier would cover that. And you know, while we're here, it's worth addressing. It's interesting, if anybody has ever sat on a jury or knows anything about this, in these situations, in that trial, let's say it's Ed in the car. And I don't want to be the one hurt in this scenario.
No, go ahead. I don't care.
Ed is hurt in the car. No, let's take it all the way. Andrea is the Uber driver. So Ed sues Andrea, but it's Uber or Lyft's insurance policy, assuming there's no settlement that you guys can agree to. Ultimately, you go to trial. What would happen is it would say Ed Herman versus Andrea Stanley with no mention of insurance. The way the laws are written is you're not allowed to mention even the existence of insurance. It's one individual versus the other. Although I think most people know, although they don't, they should, that in those situations, almost always, if you see a case going to trial, there is insurance coverage. They're just not named.
That's right.
Right, and more importantly, you mentioned earlier that Uber and Lyft both carry $1 million in liability
Right.
coverage, which is quite frankly better than most drivers have. So if you're going to be hurt on the road, you're probably better off if the at-fault party is an Uber or Lyft driver because there's more available insurance. Now talk about, you had mentioned underinsured motorist coverage, and I don't think most people necessarily know what that means. But let's go back to the original scenario that you mentioned, that the Uber driver was not at fault, the other car was at fault. But let's say that other driver only has $25,000 worth of insurance, and my claim is worth $200,000 because I've had a lot of medical bills. What will happen now, if anything, with that Uber policy?
So in those instances, when you are severely hurt and the person who's at fault does not have sufficient insurance coverage, then the Uber policy would then make up for that difference. So that would be the underinsured motorist claim that you would make after you've gotten a $25,000 policy limit from the at-fault driver. Uber would kick in that difference to make up for that $250,000 claim that you made.
And people should know, I think a lot of people in those situations think, well, there's only $25,000, I can handle this myself, and then maybe I'll get a lawyer to get the rest. And what can happen is when you have a situation where underinsured motorist coverage is in effect, if you don't do things properly, meaning you have to get that underinsured motorist carrier's permission to settle the original claim, or else you may not have underinsured motorist coverage. And when you sign that release, you got to make sure some of those releases are really far-reaching and global releases, and you could end up signing a release for the $25,000, even though it's a different insurance carrier that.
Right. Well, I think that's a good lesson for everybody.
That takes the coverage away because they say, no, look, this release.
You signed a release.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you never want to sign a legal document without having a lawyer look at it.
Right.
Especially not a release, because like you say, you are releasing way more than you realize you're releasing.
It can cover things, other companies, things that you would never suspect it could possibly cover.
Yeah, and don't attempt to settle something like that on your own if you have some significant injuries, especially because you're probably cutting off other sources of insurance, including, for example, I'm assuming that my own underinsured motorist coverage from my own auto policy might also be triggered if I'm a passenger in an Uber, and because maybe my damages are $2 million. Maybe I've lost a limb and I'm going to need a lifetime of medical care. I would be able to collect not just against the at-fault party, but possibly the underinsured policies of both Uber up to $1 million, and maybe also on my own, depending on how much I carry. I may not carry enough.
I always tell people, because I think with physical injuries, it's pretty obvious when you need to seek the advice of a medical professional. You know the things you can treat at home and the things that are far beyond your medical ability, or at least my medical ability.
Yeah.
But it's not always intuitive when you need to hire a lawyer. Right. So what I say to people generally is if something was serious enough that you required professional medical attention, that should tip you off that you probably also need professional legal representation. If you got a parking ticket, you can handle that on your own. If you got a scrape on your own, you clean it off, put a Band-Aid on it, you handle that on your own. You break your arm, you get arrested, you probably want a doctor and a lawyer.
Yeah, and the nice thing with an Uber accident, if there's anything nice about an accident other than the good insurance, is everything is tracked time-wise, GPS-wise. Yeah. So there are certain proof elements that become a little bit easier. You know exactly who picked you up, in what vehicle, at what time, at what location. And, everything is done on GPS. They can tell exactly where an accident occurred.
So we don't forget, because this is really important when you're dealing with Uber and Lyft. I think I've heard of people who talked to their Uber driver, got to know him a little bit, and said, hey, instead of, can we cut Uber out of this? And like when I need to go to the airport, I'll just call you directly and I can pay you to take me to the airport. If you are not if the driver is not logged in to the Uber app during the trip, their insurance is not applicable. So you don't want to circumvent their process.
Right.
You want to make sure that driver is on the up and up. You want to make sure he's logged into the app and using the app, or else that $1 million in coverage is no longer there. Their
Right.
personal insurance probably won't cover it because there's a business exclusion if you're using your car for work, and you could find yourself saving $4 getting to the airport, having an accident, and then you're totally out of luck when it comes to any recovery.
Let me ask you this. I think the answer is obvious, but just in case the viewers may be looking at it, there are many times where I'm traveling on business and we're out somewhere, and we're not using my Uber account. You know, I'm traveling with 3 other people, and we're using one of their Uber accounts.
Right.
So does that make any difference if 3 of us are all in the car together and we're all hurt? Does it make a difference that I technically did not use my Uber and I'm not traveling? Like Uber wouldn't necessarily
Right.
have a record
Right.
of me traveling with it. I'm just a passenger of somebody else's
Well,
Uber
don't you
account.
have to put how many passengers?
No, you
are-
don't.
But you don't have to?
Mm-mm.
No, I think it just highlights the importance of getting a police report. I mean, that's like any accident. You know, if you don't get a police report, we've seen this scenario come up. People who were hurt, there was no police report. You go to settle the claim, and they say, "How do I know your client was in the car?"
And that's why having the video camera on your phone is also a very valuable tool. Because if you have the wherewithal and if you're well enough, you have the ability to kind of pull it out, and you can very quickly, using video, can document who's in the car,
Yeah.
whether they seem to be hurt. You can look at the property damage on both vehicles, because that might be the only chance you're ever going to have to see both vehicles.
So anytime you're in an accident,
Yeah.
take pictures of the damage to the car. if you can.
Confirm who your Uber driver is. You know, all of those things can kind of be done and confirmed at the scene so that there's no question. But more importantly, I think if you are a passenger, even if you're not the one on the Uber account, you're going to be covered just the same as if it were your Uber account.
You should
You know,
be, yeah.
you're driving in an Uber.
Because it doesn't change who was at fault for the accident.
No, it doesn't. It just, you know, because the business relationship, it's a little bit harder to prove when it's not your own Uber account. But you're in the car and you're on a professional fare. So.
Right, and while I'm thinking of it, another scenario I'd look out for, and I've experienced this a couple of times, and it made me really uncomfortable. Sometimes you'll have an Uber driver who is either driving a different car, not the one they have registered on their Uber account, or they're driving a friend's car, or they're driving a rental car. I don't know how Uber would handle that, but I suspect that may become an issue. So, and for your own safety, if you have an Uber driver who's not in the car that's registered to their Uber account, who knows? How do you know that somebody didn't carjack your Uber driver, down the block, and then they log in, and who knows? I mean, I would just typically try to make sure that that license plate matches up to who's supposed to pick you up.
So would you
Yeah.
notify Uber in that case, or?
I think I would.
Yeah,
At
you
a
might
minimum,
turn
I
down-
wouldn't get in the car.
Yeah, you might just
Or
turn
not get in
down
the car.
the
Yeah.
drive, and that happens actually fairly often. Somebody just uses their other vehicle on that particular day, and
Yeah.
it may be totally on the level, but I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I
risk
don't like it. Although, unrelated, I don't want to get too far off topic, but we're on kind of the safety. And one thing I find very useful in Uber, and I'm sure Lyft has this too, is there's a function where you can share your ride. So let's say it's late at night, you're a little uncomfortable, you just want to make sure your friend or husband or whoever knows where you are and make sure you get to your destination. There's a function where you can hit share your ride. It texts it to whoever you want, and then in real time they can track where you are and when your ride ends. It's just a nice little security feature that they offer.
Yeah. One last thing before we wrap up. We all saw about a month or two ago that accident. Uber's been testing out some self-driving cars, and a woman was killed in Arizona as she was attempting to cross the street, walking her bicycle across the street. From what I understand, Uber settled that case very, very quickly with that woman's family.
I think they often do in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, that's a situation where, again, just, in case our audience doesn't know the answer, but that person obviously had no contractual relationship with Uber. They're just a pedestrian, and there's not even a driver technically. So who does that claim go against? I mean, obviously Uber's going to be responsible, but if it's their fault. But, they had a driver, but that driver was not really a driver. That was a backup driver that was just sitting in the chair. This is Uber's technology. Who's that claim against?
Well, that woman's family made the claim against Uber.
Right, it has to be,
So
right?
there's no other person that, the claim could be made against in that sense. But I think since that accident, Uber has suspended their driverless car program.
Yeah, I don't trust these driverless
Yeah.
cars. I mean,
No.
you have a car, you have a driver.
Robots.
I mean, it just seems insane. And I know people say they're safer and they've got cameras that can look in every direction, but you know, I don't know. I think I'm gonna have a very hard time accepting
I
driverless
agree. I
cars.
think there should be some eyes on the road.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the vision is you'll just get into an Uber. There's no driver. Sit in the back seat. Do your thing.
I remember that
I
in the
would
movie
not be
Total
comfortable.
Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Remember he'd get in that cab and it had that little
Yeah.
robot? Pretty sure he crashed at one point. So I
I
don't
think
know.
we're
It's-
way further from that than anyone. You know, a lot of people think this is just around the corner. I am a non-believer. I think it'll be decades and decades before that.
I agree completely. All right, well, listen, I think we've covered it
Yeah.
as much as we can. If you have any further questions on this topic or any other topic, put it in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed, remember to subscribe. Have a good weekend.